Well, good morning, and thank you, Cameron, for that more than kind introduction, and thank you for all of your hard work as class president this past year. Perhaps I'll see you or one of your other classmates here someday making the commencement address. So, President Borst, Chairman Brigham, members of the Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, administration, and alumni of the College of Idaho, family and friends of the graduates, Mayor Nancolis, and other distinguished guests, and most importantly, 2017 graduates of the College of Idaho. It is indeed my privilege and my honor to address you this morning, something frankly I couldn't imagine being asked to do, let alone do, when I graduated here, although it wasn't outside, it was in Jewett Auditorium, some 38 years ago. Many things have changed about this campus, but many not so much. After all, I was here when Saturday Night Live, or as we call now SNL, started its first season in 1977. And despite the passage of 40 years, it's still one of the most watched satires and continues to be germane to our national conversation. Also, when I started at the College of Idaho, we had a football team, but it was disbanded in the spring of 1978, so there was no football during my senior year. However, we made up for it somewhat by moving homecoming to one of the basketball weekends in winter of 1979. More about football later. The name is the same now, College of Idaho, despite a brief detour in the early 90s to Albertson College. And as Chairman Brigham mentioned, look at the soon-to-be new and incredible library and student center, thanks to the generous contribution of a former trustee. She was not even an alumna of the college, but someone who loved the college so much like everyone else here today. It appears fitting that we will now have a library equipped with the most up-to-date social media connections and other attributes, while retaining the archives and other historical trappings of the Turtling Library. When I started here, Turtling Library was a modern building, and the top floor steri was occupied by pigeons. Voorhees was a men's-only dorm and a unique force to be reckoned with. And that won't make sense to you unless you were someone who resided or visited there at the time. Finney was a women's-only dorm and a place for quiet or not so quiet reflection. I recently had the opportunity to tour Voorhees, and I was frankly amazed. The transformation of the dorm, or Voorhees, and also to be the transformation that will occur at Finney. These two dorms were built in 1910 and 1912, lived in by several of us here today. But the transformation of them to contemporary living environments while restoring their original architectural beauty is simply amazing. And I must give thanks and acknowledge my dear friend and alumnus, Andy Erstead, for his architectural genius on these projects. Now, when I began my journey at the College of Idaho, I was like the rest of you, unsure what cards I would be dealt while pursuing my education, and undecided about what I would do if and when I obtained my academic degree or degrees. Like Haley, I didn't travel far for my college experience, but 30 miles from home still hit my parents quite hard, probably the sign of leaving the nest, as you all did, some traveling a much farther distance than others. I made the decision to attend the college in part due to the small size of the campus community and my interest in a liberal arts education, along with a scholarship that helped tremendously. Although the enrollment has grown to over 1,000, was about half that when I was here, I mentioned the size of the college in part because of the recent recognition and ranking of the college as number 2 on the Best College Reviews 2017 list of the top best small colleges in the United States. They could have asked any of you, and I'm sure you would have said it was number 1, but we did get number 2, right? But when I saw this, I reflected back to conversations and actual debates between the trustees and administration that occurred less than 10 years ago when we were trying to condense the mission statement to the 2 sentences it is today. And one version had the word small before private in the first sentence that now reads, "The College of Idaho, a private residential liberal arts college, prepares students to lead productive and fulfilling lives." The final consensus was that although the college likely will always remain small in terms of the size of its enrollment, we did not want the word to diminish the breadth and the import of the mission. With this recent ranking and others, it's clear that size is secondary to high graduation rates, outstanding academic offerings, and the unique peak curriculum. As President Boris stated, this college is a national gem. As I worked to perfect my speech today, I can tell you I felt immense pressure as I watched or read about other quote-unquote best commencement speeches given in the past or that have been given over the past couple of weeks. Don't know if you've taken the time to watch some of those, but I have. For example, Will Ferrell sang at the end of the address at USC, "Trust me, you're not going to experience that. That's not happening today for me." Thank goodness for Megan, too. There was no way that anyone could compete with that. I've never been able to carry a tune, and you're not going to suffer through it with me today. But when deciding what my message would be, I went various ways. I first thought about talking about the book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. But then I realized that that theme had been thoroughly exhausted. I also realized it would not be as genuine coming from me, as I didn't have the opportunity to attend kindergarten. It wasn't included in public education in Idaho at the time. So having abandoned my theme around lessons learned during kindergarten for today, I'll look for other opportunities to explain to other audiences why I believe early childhood education, including kindergarten and preschool, provides so many benefits to our society. I also momentarily thought about changing my theme to Everything You Need to Know You Learned at the College of Idaho. Then I thought that was a bit too comprehensive or cliche. As a result, I settled on two immediate goals for my address this morning. First, make it short. And second, to give at least one message that you may not soon forget, although I'm not expecting you will remember who was your speaker this morning. I don't remember who was the speaker at my graduation, although I do remember that Jack Simplot shared some extemporaneous remarks. Many of those heard those same extemporaneous remarks year after year, and he did it at every graduation he could attend while he was alive. And I do remember those remarks, but clearly, I will confess, I have neither the ability nor the stature to emulate Jack Simplot. With this backdrop, I decided to focus today on the virtue of courage, a virtue I believe each of us is born with, but importantly, each of us is equally at risk of losing without nurture, support, learning, counseling, and membership from others. By others, I include family, friends, educators, classmates, counselors, and coaches of all sorts. You've trusted a lot of people and learned a lot during the past 4 years through your experiences here. And some of the lessons you learned came from accomplishments of various dimensions and also defeats of various dimensions. Throughout, you have had many cheerleaders, some more apparent to you than others. Presidents Hinberg and Borst, professors, the administration, staff, coaches, counselors, campus ministry, deans, classmates, the members of the Board of Trustees, alumni, and many others. Yoke Fam is indeed a big squad. It's that support, along with that from your family and friends, from your hometown or home country, that I believe will enable you to summons the courage that it takes to make a positive difference in your life, the lives of those you love, in your personal and professional communities, and likely for some of you, a positive difference in our country and our world. So why am I talking to you today about courage? And it wasn't because I had a preface of Haley's comments, but it's because I came to the realization a few months ago while working on this speech that courage is a virtue the College of Idaho inspired in me, and one I can explain through sharing a past personal story of what others have described as courage on my part. To quote President John F. Kennedy, "The stories of past courage can define that ingredient. They can teach, they can offer hope, they can provide inspiration, but they cannot supply courage itself. For this, each man and woman must look into his own soul." Two things happened about a year ago that, along with hours of reflection over a span of almost 3 years, after history knocked on the doors of my judicial chambers, helped me appreciate what others saw as courage in my actions and for me to talk about today. First, when I was participating on a panel of judges speaking to new attorneys, I had the third-person experience of listening to a state court judge tell this group of lawyers that he admired me, and that he admired me because I had shown the intellectual courage to decide tough issues as a federal judge without allowing my personal beliefs or fears about popularity influence my decisions. Second, shortly after that, I received a letter from a complete stranger that concluded with a similar observation, but began with a reference to the story I've chosen to share with you today. The letter from the stranger began, and I will quote it and read it so I get it correctly. "We don't know each other, but the impact you've had on my life is one I truly will never forget. On May 13, 2014, you ruled that the Idaho marriage laws banning same-sex marriage were unconstitutional and set in motion hope for equality for thousands of Idahoans, including myself and my soon-to-be husband." End quote. The letter continued with some details about how he'd met his soon-to-be husband, certain trials and tribulations in their life together, and their engagement. The reference to the date that I issued the decision finding Idaho's marriage laws unconstitutional was exact in this letter. Now, 3 years after that decision, I can talk a bit about what I did before issuing it and before enjoining the ban on same-sex marriage that derived from Idaho statutory law and an amendment to the Idaho Constitution. The case was randomly assigned to me as one of 4 federal trial judges who could have received the assignment in November of 2013, during the time that challenges were being made or taken to other states' marriage laws around the country. I immediately recognized that my decision, regardless of which way I decided it, would be, just let me say, controversial. And frankly, it was not something I ever thought I would need or be asked to weigh in on. I spent countless hours researching the law and reviewing the record in the case before me that involved 4 same-sex couples living in Idaho whom had been denied marriage licenses in Idaho or denied recognition of their marriages in other states. Without going into too much detail, I reasoned that the Idaho's marriage laws, including the 2006 amendments to the Idaho's Constitution, which was passed by 63.3% of Idaho voters in 2006, violated the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. 4 days after that decision was issued, I greeted the 2014 graduating class of this college in my then role as chair of the Board of Trustees. As I approached the podium, the faculty stood and clapped before I gave my welcoming. No explanation was provided, but I learned later that I was trending, and I will say in various directions, on Facebook among alumni of the college, alumni of the University of Idaho College of Law, my Bora, where I went to high school, and many other places that I dare not think about. But that same day, the commencement speaker, Chris Farnsworth, also an alumnus, surprisingly injected a comment during the middle of his speech. And his speech was about zombies and the end of the world, which are the subjects of his fiction. And before challenging the graduates to make the world an even better place, and I quote, "And just this week in Idaho, a brave judge once again upheld the simple idea that all men and women deserve the equal benefits of the law despite the pressures of prejudice and bigotry." The brave comment stuck with me, as did the moment of respect from faculty, and as did the comment from the judicial colleague regarding intellectual courage. brave, courageous, me? How does that virtue fit within the oath of office I took when I assumed the role of a federal judge? Well, it was to uphold the laws and the Constitution of the United States to the best of my ability. And the technical answer is that it has everything to do with judicial independence, something that has been the topic of discussion over recent months or years, and something that sadly is often either not understood or is misunderstood. But judicial independence isn't my theme for today. I will save that also for a later audience. One of my mantras as a federal trial court judge is one espoused by retired Associate Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman of the Supreme Court. She says, quote, "Maybe in error, but never in doubt." I knew when I issued my decision that it would be appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and that's because, and probably potentially to the Supreme Court, or at least other cases were going to go to the Supreme Court, again, regardless of how I decided it. And we have a saying as judges and lawyers that the Supreme Court is always right because they're last. And that's not something that trial courts can say. But the decision was taken to the Ninth Circuit and stayed while other circuit decisions were pending potential certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. However, same-sex marriages were allowed in Idaho beginning in the middle of October of 2014. The controversy was not over, however, and it's not completely over to this day, although the Supreme Court of the United States issued its marriage equality decision that applies nationwide on June 26 of 2015. Almost 2 years later, I continue to receive comments, some far from complimentary, but several calling my decision brave or courageous. Whether it was or it wasn't courageous, I've asked myself the question, where or how did I obtain the ability to make a decision in a case while knowing it would be controversial and would have a statewide and broader impact, regardless of how I decided it, on civil rights, and that it would be forever a part of my home state's legal history? The answer, I truly believe that the 2/3 of my lifetime since I began my educational journey here at the College of Idaho, along with my continuing relationship with the college as a student, president of the Student Senate, alumna, president of the National Alumni Board, and member and chair of the dedicated men and women who volunteer their time, talent, and treasures to the college's trustees, gave me that ability. I did the best I could, despite my fear, to apply the law and to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the oath I took when I assumed the federal bench. Although some may refer to me as a so-called judge, or other terms I need not repeat, I learned from my extended Yote family and my own family, specifically my father, my husband, and my daughter, who have been my rocks, that failing to honor your word, or in this case, your oath, is cowardly, and that's the antithesis of courageous. And when I think of cowardly, it's natural for me, I'm a lover of The Wizard of Oz, to think about the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz. In the scene after snow had fallen on the poppy field, the lion commented in his casual language. He says, "Unusual weather we're having, ain't it?" He goes on to say, "All right, I'll go in there to the castle for Dorothy. Wicked witch or no wicked witch, guards or no guards, I'll tear them apart. I may not come out alive, but I'm going in there. There's only one thing I want you fellows," as he talks to the woodsman and the scarecrow, "to do." And they ask, "What's that?" And the lion says, "Talk me out of it." And I know I felt like the cowardly lion on many occasions, and all of you likely have as well. But remember the moral of the story. The lion was looking to receive courage from the wizard, but he eventually realized he had it all along. Like you, I've received nothing but encouragement during my 4 years here at the college. I played field hockey, probably don't even know what that is, but I played rugby, and that's true. It's not fake news. I played rugby. I played intramural softball. I ran for the class officer position, was vice president, president of the Senate. I joined a social sorority. I learned to ski, to downhill ski, lifetime sport. And I was encouraged to take the law school admissions test for law school. The support I had from my math professor and advisor, Roger Higdon, who later became one of the deans of the college, and my English professor, Louis Atterbury, who is a trustee emeritus now, was tremendous. You're thinking a math major goes to law school? Sounds a bit crazy, right? Because most lawyers will admit they went to law school because they could not survive calculus. This in and of itself, though, says a lot about the value of a liberal arts education. I learned that I could reach beyond my comfort zone and continue to do so by running for editor-in-chief at the Law Review, and I engaged in private practice as a trial attorney for over 25 years before I was appointed to the federal bench in March of 2008. And I will add that I was the first woman appointed to Idaho's federal bench after 118 years. And although I cannot claim that my decisions in life have all been correct, right, or the perfect ones, the college taught me how to trust myself enough to summon the inner strength and courage to make tough decisions or take action, even in the face of fear and even in the face of potential failure. Now back to the letter that I read the introduction to, and I'm going to take off this silly hat. It's not a silly hat, but it's bothering me. I cherish this gift. This is the end of the letter from the stranger. And I will read, quote, "I cherish this gift and feel very strongly that you were one of the people who have given it. While I don't expect you to attend my wedding, I hoped you might see the opportunities you've provided for us. In writing this, I realized you may not even personally agree with same-sex marriage, but made the decision based on legal knowledge and not personal belief. Either way, I want you to know I will not squander this gift, and I just wanted you to know what an amazing difference you've made in the life of a stranger. Thank you for your service." End of quote. The point to be made here is that my actions that were viewed as courageous were predicated on doing what I thought the law demanded. So enough about me. Now I want to talk a little bit about you, the graduates, because I believe each of you already has a story. And again, when I say story, it's not a fake story, it's a real story of past courage that you can share. And we just heard Haley do that herself. And we didn't work together on these speeches, but she shared some of those stories, and she has those stories to share about her experiences here that others will see as courageous. The fact that she stood up here and made that speech and acknowledged her fear is just another example. But the diploma that you're receiving today won't define courage. It's those experiences you've had at the college and as you move forward in your lives, and that will lead others to describe you as courageous. And I'm going to suggest just a few, and by suggesting a few, I'm not diminishing any of the other accomplishments or stories that you all have to tell. But one of the reasons several of the graduates today came to the college as freshmen in the fall of 2013 was to play football. Now that doesn't sound so brave until you realize or recall that there was no football season during the fall of 2013. Instead, it was what we called 0 year, when the football team members practiced but did not compete in the Frontier Conference till the fall of 2014. And this is because football wasn't reinstituted until the Board of Trustees approved the return of it in May of 2012. This, too, is a part of my history with the College of Idaho, beginning in the spring of 1978, when I was one of 3 students who served, and I should add as a non-voting member, on a trustee committee that voted to disband football and gutted athletic programs to literally keep the doors open. And then 34 years later, I was chairman of the Board of Trustees when the board overwhelmingly and somewhat surprisingly to me approved reinstatement of football. This clearly is an instance when history informed the present. But I think you can say I'm the last person to shy away from controversy. Another circumstance comes to mind, and that's the fact that my first meeting after election to the Board of Trustees in 2007 was a special meeting when we reclaimed the name College of Idaho. Again, a tough and somewhat unpopular decision, but one that many called brave, and another example of how history informed the present. Now back to football. Close to 2/3 of the freshman students that started in 2013 to participate in the football program stayed here the full 4 years and are graduating today. 29 of you in total, and all with high academic standing. And yes, I believe they were courageous because they took risks and likely turned down other colleges and universities, but trusted Coach Morosky and athletic directors Holly and Rossi and their teammates, and built a team that has so far surpassed any and all expectations its first 3 seasons. You, the members that came here to play football, you've been leaders on and off the field. You've made history and brought the Caldwell community and Yope fam together like no one really even imagined. And that's regardless of how you feel about football. No one will ever forget the size of the crowd and the enthusiasm on the day of that first home game, and many that followed. And yes, there's much more than football that demonstrates the courage in this graduating class. Many of you participate in late night services with campus ministry rather than doing other activities. You sit at the bench with Professor Berger or watch Berger banter on the blog. You take winter session classes in the wilderness or volunteer in communities near and far. And speaking of the Berger banter, I watched episode 10. I don't know how many of you watched it, but you can find it on YouTube. You may be impressed that I found it on YouTube, where Professor Berger described what he was looking forward during commencement. We already watched live today as he protectively carried and placed the mace in the stand at the base of the podium, as he described in that episode. But it was his comment about the emotional attachment he has to the students that will be severed when you all leave with your parents promptly after graduation that caught my attention. You may or may not realize today how your professors and coaches helped shape your life. But like me, I'm sure you will eventually. But please stay in touch when you can, and when the time is right, let them know how much you appreciate the influence they have had on your life. And don't just make the quote-unquote live call Professor Berger described to see if he or she is alive. Another example, and some of them are about athletics, but some basketball players are graduating. I mean, lots of athletes are graduating today. And one of them is the shortest but fastest. And he had the courage to trust Coach Garson, who was the coach that didn't overlook him due to his small size, and culminated in being named as the Defensive Player of the Year in his senior year. Others left their home country or a larger institution, such as Boise State, to follow their dream to play. And I mean really play phenomenal basketball. Each had a tall order impact on the team and Yope fam, and each has a story of courage to share with others. And among all the athletic accomplishments, there are the amazing academic achievements that you heard about. Haley, Michaela, and all of you. Dean Binion told me that there were some 19 students that applied for outstanding student, and those weren't all of the outstanding students that applied. I think you're all outstanding, and you have the experiences here that will make you an ongoing success. I also see the students who participated in the wilderness experience in the Sawtooths. 26 straight days of snow. What was that, the Snowcopolis? And it was at a higher degree than here in Caldwell even. I see those students as brave, as well as the student who received the Davis Project for Peace Award for his past and future efforts toward finding a solution for bringing much-needed water to a farming village located 15 miles from his hometown in Palestine. What I thought was even more amazing He's using that $10,000 award to support a pipeline. That's brave. And another simple observation, I was on a hike in the Boise foothills on Earth Day, and I saw Yotes, and I was so proud. I said, "Go Yotes," marking a new trail that will be a lasting contribution, taking their time on a Saturday morning to do that. There are so many more examples to share, but I know the more I talk, the longer I'm standing in the way of you receiving the diplomas that will set you on your way to your next adventures. But I do want you to know that I see you as the leaders of tomorrow. And we need you to not only learn from your experiences here, but to share your personal experiences. Those are your stories of past courage. They define courage, and they will inspire others. And not just today, but do that in the future. You have the building blocks that will allow you to follow a strong moral compass and keep your priorities straight. And when you give your word or you take an oath, follow it to the best of your ability. When you make a mistake or are dismayed by the actions or words of those around you, don't give up. As Martin Luther King once said, quote, "We must accept finite disappointment, but we must never lose infinite hope." Each and every one of you have the intellect and ability to be a leader, if you choose to do so, because you have the courage it takes, and it is supported by those that love and care for you. You have the courage to think about what's right instead of relying on personal prejudice or gut response, followed by doing what's right regardless of whether you win or lose. Remember that courage is not synonymous with fearlessness. I heard Haley say that this morning as well. And it is a heart word, as the root of the word is cor, the Latin word for heart. Courage involves speaking and acting from your heart and your soul, as I earlier quoted from John F. Kennedy. So I will conclude this morning with a quote to poet Maya Angelou from an article that appeared in USA Today in 1988. "Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We cannot be kind, true, merciless, generous, or honest." Thanks for listening. Congratulations to the 2017 graduating class of the College of Idaho, and go Yotes.